In 10th century Baghdad, poets didn't just eat. They composed verses about the steam from lamb stew. Neha Vermani, writing for Scroll.in in late June, looks back at how these culinary rhymes served as sharp tools for social commentary, a far cry from the hollow imagery of modern AI-generated media. There's a similar sense of lost mastery in Sara Hershander's piece for Vox from yesterday. It tracks how the rush toward air conditioning stripped American homes of the porches and thick walls that once kept people safe without a power grid. It's worth pausing on the trade-off. In the pursuit of instant comfort, some of the most durable ways of living have been quietly set aside. Those surreal AI videos of talking tacos and cheating strawberries might seem new, but in an essay from late June, Neha Vermani finds their imaginative ancestors in medieval poetry. From Cairo to Shiraz, fruits and vegetables once served as political rivals and wise counselors. Notice her use of a 17th century debate between a boastful gourd and a patient pine tree to show how food could carry a sharp social critique.
Long before AI made food talk, Arabic and Persian poets gave it kingdoms, personalities, and plots. Treacherous fruits, warmongering mutton, AI food dramas can't compare to Arabic and Persian poetry. Strawberrito is cheating on her husband Banananito. Chawal falls for taco, during a trip to Mexico while his girlfriend Rajma pines away in their village in Punjab. Potato discovers the money laundering scheme of his coworker Brinjal at Onion's car repair firm. This is one genre of the ever-expanding AI-generated universe of brain rot reels, talking food and beverages, perpetually caught up in one drama-filled predicament or another. Watching these food dramas was a reminder of a similar, though considerably more imaginative and decidedly less cringeworthy phenomenon that flourished across the interconnected Persian, Arabic, and Urdu literary worlds. Between the 11th and 19th centuries, poets and storytellers from Cairo to Shiraz and Hindustan transformed flowers, trees, fruits, vegetables, and kitchen ingredients into rivals, vigilantes, rulers, counselors, and companions, endowing them with voices, personalities, and ambitions of their own. Through their quarrels, alliances, and adventures, these poets reflected on the social and cultural transformations of their times. Many of these literary conceits are familiar to contemporary readers through the poetry of Rumi, Sadi, Hafiz, Mirza Ghalib, and even the playful riddles posthumously attributed to Amir Khusrau. In their verses, the rose could appear as a beloved, a bride, a queen, or the sovereign of the garden enthroned beneath a jeweled canopy.
Elsewhere, rosewater, privileged by its association with the Prophet Muhammad's sweat, became a rival to wine, boasting, "O wine, I am licit while you are forbidden." The narcissus, meanwhile, might take the form of the beloved's languid, intoxicated eye, or a vigilant sentinel presiding over a gathering of drinkers. Even court nobles and warriors engaged in such anthropomorphic literary exercises. A notable, though little-known example is a Munazara, debate poem by Hushal Khan Khattak, the 17th century Pashtun chief who, after falling out with Aurangzeb, led resistance against the Mughal state on the northwestern frontier. In this poem, which contrasts fleeting success with the virtues of patience, resilience, and longevity, a fast-growing gourd vine climbs a pine tree and mocks its slow growth. The gourd boasts, "Look at me. In just 1 week, I have reached your height." The old, wise pine responds, "Wait until the hardships of winter arrive. Then we shall speak of age and growth." Culinary imagination. The same creative impulse animated kitchens, food markets, and dining spreads. One of the most entertaining examples of this culinary imagination is a 15th century Arabic work from Mamluk Cairo titled Kitab al-Harb al-Malshuk Bain Allah Maldan wa Hawadir as-Souk, The Delectable War Between Mutton and the Snacks of the Marketplace. Authored by Ahmad ibn Yahya ibn Hassan al-Hajjar, the stonemason, the poem narrates a conflict between two camps, each represented by a range of personified edible goods.
The story recounts how King Mutton, proud of being savored by the old money elite, is alarmed at the rising influence of his rival, King Honey, ruler of the snacks of the marketplace.
Determined to assert supremacy, King Mutton dispatches his envoy, a sheep's fatty tail, with an ultimatum demanding submission. King Honey refuses. Letters dripping with insults are exchanged. Armies are mobilized, and a full-scale culinary war begins. On one side stood the meat camp. King Mutton, joined by his wazir goat meat, commander beef, and an assortment of meats, animal fats, and meat dishes. On the other stood King Honey, at the head of a remarkably diverse coalition. His kingdom included Syrian and local milks, Lebanese yogurt delicacies, Sicilian cheeses, and honey imported from North Africa, Turkey, and Portugal, as well as sweets and sweetening agents such as fruit molasses, Palmyran olives, turnips, cucumbers, and eggplants pickled with mint, capers, olives, and salted lemons. This army also included vinegars, Alexandrian fish paste, salted sparrows, salted fish, river mussels in oil and lemon water, fish dishes, and numerous river and sea fishes, both imported and local, preserved and fresh, fried eggs, omelets, hot grilled colocasia, lentils, hummus, and broad beans. Other members of this ensemble were cold snacks, such as seasoned pumpkin and mustard seeds, beans and olive oil and caraway, fried spinach, and fried eggplant. Fats included clarified butter, sesame oil, tahina, a paste ground from sesame seeds, and fresh butter. Before the battle, there was treachery. Sheep's Tail secretly bribed several of Honey's advisors, who agreed to betray their sovereign when war broke out. The first clash ended badly for Honey's forces. Hoping to reverse his fortunes, King Honey summoned reinforcements in the form of an impressive corps of fruits. They arrived in splendor and joined the fight, only to suffer an even more crushing defeat. The forces of King Mutton prevailed, and the meat camp emerged victorious. Food, taste, and hierarchy. Beneath this comically absurd warfare lies a simmering commentary on hierarchies of food, taste, class, and meal structure in medieval Cairo. Mutton and its supporters repeatedly dismissed Honey's followers as the food of paupers and rabble, insisting that only meat deserved the status of a proper or real meal. Yet many members of Honey's kingdom were expensive imports, hardly the fare of the poor. The result is a text that probably captures a reactionary impulse among the old elite of society against the flooding of Cairo's markets with a diverse range of imported produce. The mass or easy availability of these delicacies may have been perceived as indicating a shift in taste fueled by a parvenu merchant community, and as threatening the dominance and prestige of the old elite's dietary preferences, centered on locally procured meat and its byproducts. King Honey and his army of foods were thus snubbed and relegated to the category of snacks, smaller in portion and seen as less substantial and combatively less nourishing. Other rivalries within the edible kingdom that found an audience in the early modern Persianate world were contests staged by a 15th century poet from Shiraz between the staple dish, buhra, a seasoned flour paste, meat, and vegetable-based preparation, and rice, a relatively new entrant to the culinary order. Having risen to prominence in the wake of the Mongol invasions of the 13th century, rice dramatically transformed the cuisines of the Iranian plateau and Central Asia. The Mongols had first encountered rice as a dietary staple in China and went on to popularize it in the other regions they invaded.
These poems were penned by Abu Ishaq Hallaj, the cotton carder, Shirazi. A boon companion at the court of Timurid ruler Iskandar Mirza, he earned the title Bushak-i-Atima, Bushak of Foods, for building an entire literary career around culinary poetry. Parodying the great Persian masters, Firdausi, Khayyam, Rumi, and Hafiz, he subjected their lofty compositions about heroes, lovers, mystics, and kings to the vocabulary of kitchens, markets, and dining spreads. Bushak's poetry circulated widely in Mughal South Asia, forming part of a shared literary universe that stretched from Iran to the Indian subcontinent. In Bushak's Dastani Muzaffar wa Bugra, the story of saffron rice and bugra, written in imitation of Firdausi's Shahnama,
rice appears as an ambitious newcomer that challenges and ultimately prevails over Bugra's established supremacy. The poem narrates how rice begins life buried in mud and water, only to be beaten and stripped of its enclosing husk, as if lamenting its condition like a tragic lover in a Persian romance. Upon reaching the grocery store, rice finds itself seated beside ugly black lentils and cries out to God for deliverance. Give me meat, give me oil, give me saffron. This plea expresses an ambition to climb the dietary hierarchy through sophisticated cooking and seasoning techniques, such as the addition of meat, oil, and saffron, which signified refinement. Eventually, rice is adorned with these ingredients, crowned, enthroned, and acknowledged as ruler of the dining spread by the surrounding dishes. In another of Bouchac's compositions, Majara-i Birinj wa Bugra, the conflict takes a different turn.
This time, Bugra overcomes the combined forces of rice and fried meat by imprisoning them inside a gipa, a stuffed tripe dish. The conflict might have escalated into another culinary war had a squash not intervened as mediator. Peace is restored, and the rival foods conclude by paying tribute to one another's tastiness. Beneath this reconciliation lies a history of cultural assimilation. It mirrors the evolution of Timurid cuisine, which was shaped by the convergence of diverse culinary traditions, Central Asian and Turkic influences, exemplified by Bugra and Gipa, and the growing prominence of rice, fostered by increased contact with China and India, which encouraged the adoption of this grain and the creation of new dishes based on it. The Timurid culinary repertoire reached Hindustan through diplomatic ties, the migration of Sufi saints, and the movement of artists, all of which linked the region's sultanates with the Timurid courts in Khorasan, Herat, and Shiraz. This culinary connection took deeper root with the arrival of Babur, the Timurid prince who founded the Mughal Empire. Recipes for Bugra and Gipa are recorded in manuals from the regional sultanates of Malwa and the Deccan, as well as in Mughal cookbooks. References to Mughal emperors consuming these dishes also survive in autobiographical and biographical literature, including an account of Humayun and his retinue finding time, amid a demanding military campaign, to gather and prepare Bugra. In Hindustan, however, Timurid cuisine encountered a foodscape where rice was a long-standing staple. As a result, the South Asian khichdi came to sit as comfortably on elite spreads as pulao and rice biryani.
Pulao and biryani, though of Central Asian and Iranian provenance, were reworked in Mughal kitchens by incorporating spices and ingredients readily available in Hindustan. What began as a quarrel between different foods ultimately gave way to cosmopolitan cuisines shaped by movement, encounter, and exchange across Asia. All this to say, the next time an AI-generated love-struck mango or a scheming tomato appears on your phone screen, remember that food has been talking for centuries. It simply had better things to say. Its stories were crafted by sharper minds, and telling them placed no significant demands on water, land, or energy resources. Neha Vermani is an honorary fellow in the Faculty of Arts and Humanities at Durham University. She is a historian of early modern South Asia, and her research focuses on the intersections of food practices, material culture, and scientific and ethical discourses on the body, the senses, and the natural world.
Neha Vermani leaves the listener with the image of a wise old pine tree telling a fast-growing gourd to wait for the winter. It's a reminder that sophistication isn't just about complexity, it's about the ability to endure. While Vermani focuses on the brain rot of AI-generated media replacing the rich symbolic depth of Persian and Arabic poetry, the underlying anxiety is about what happens when culture trades long-term meaning for instant, superficial gratification. The interesting thing is how this same tension between immediate comfort and structural endurance shows up in the physical world. Read alongside Vermani, Sara Hershander's reporting on heat waves looks less like a story about air conditioning and more like a story about the loss of architectural memory. Herschander points out that by leaning entirely on the AC, American buildings have become ectotherms, lizards that can't regulate their own temperature. Notice how the glass office towers Herschander describes mirror the hollow food dramas Vermani critiques. Both are engineered for a specific, controlled environment, but lack the built-in logic of a Greek island's white paint or Iran's wind catchers. Putting these two together suggests a pattern. By solving for the immediate problem, boredom or heat, the modern approach has created a new kind of fragility that only reveals itself when the system breaks.
It was not the postcard-worthy aesthetics that prompted Greek islanders to first drench their cliffside carved homes, churches, and pathways in a thick layer of pearly white paint. The fatal flaw in how America handles heat waves. As heat waves strain the power grid, passive cooling can help homes stay safer when the air goes out when the light goes out. Much like wearing a white tunic on a hot sunny day, painting your house a shade of reflective white is a fine way to keep an ancient island cool, bouncing some of the sun's heat back into space instead of absorbing it into the structure of the buildings themselves. Before air conditioning existed, people in warmer areas of the world often built with similar techniques in mind. Iran's picturesque chimney-like bajgirs, or wind catchers, have helped desert dwellers stay cool for millennia, for example. And in the tropics, Malaysians have long engineered their homes on stilts to avoid floods and let a breeze in. Key takeaways. AC has made Americans much safer during heat waves, but it also transformed how the nation builds for heat. With no built-in protections, many of today's homes quickly become deadly heat traps if the power goes out, or if the AC breaks during a heat wave. Momentum is growing for passive cooling, which can greatly reduce your need for AC and your power bill. Many homes and cities in Europe are still living as if AC had never been invented, relying largely on their thick shutters, ventilated courtyards, and other strategies to encourage shade and airflow. But after a deadly, record-shattering heat wave tore through Western Europe last week, killing at least 1,300 people, it has become increasingly clear that old-world buildings are not cooling enough on their own for our new world of heat. As a similar heat dome now pulses over the eastern U.S., a nation of AC aficionados faces the inverse of this problem. Since just after the end of World War II, the U.S. has built its homes, schools, and hospitals so thoroughly with AC in mind that most buildings have no built-in defense against the heat at all. The air conditioner made possible America's cavernous McMansions, megamalls, and frigid glass office towers, engineered like ectotherms, liable to soak up a heat wave like a cold-blooded lizard sprawled out on a rock on a scorching summer's day. Clearly, climate change has, to some extent, vindicated America's hyper-reliance on the AC. Unlike in Europe, with its suddenly vulnerable passive cooling systems that kept things temperate back when weather used to be normal, the U.S. can take the heat as long as the air is on. In the aftermath of the AC-enabled post-war housing boom, the likelihood of an American dying on a scorching hot day fell by a staggering 80%. But the roaring, life-saving success of the AC has also embedded a profound vulnerability. The moment the power goes out, as it's prone to do in a heat wave, or that electricity bills get too onerous, which tends to happen when the AC is cranked, the nation's cold-blooded buildings convert into furnaces. In most conventional American houses, if you lose power in the middle of an extreme heat wave or in a blizzard, you've got hours before you need to get out, said Alexander Gard Murray, executive director of Passive House Massachusetts, a group that encourages the state to build naturally cooler buildings, or passive houses, from the start.
Some techniques are state-of-the-art and technologically novel. Others are ancient, and still many others are basic common sense. Don't build facing the sun. Plant trees, add an awning, and replace heat-radiating asphalt driveways with gravel. Notably, none of these strategies involve shoving your AC unit out the window, but they can help your air conditioning work a lot less hard, which, by the way, could cut your electricity bills in half, at a time when America's electrical grid is desperately straining to keep everything online. Most importantly, it ensures that if something does go wrong, if the power goes out, said Gard Murray, you're still going to be okay. Air conditioning reshaped how America builds for heat. American homes used to reflect the cities they were built in. Cool air flowed beneath the floorboards of New Orleans' breezy raised shotgun houses. Boston's winter winds met the saltbox houses' long, sloping roofs, and Pueblo tribes used thick blocks of mud to build adobe homes that withstood the desert's daily fluctuations. But in 1947, an engineer named Henry Gowson transformed how America builds with his invention of the people's air conditioner,
a low-cost AC unit, until then a luxury item, snug enough to nestle into a residential window. With millions of service members then returning from World War II, the nation needed more housing, and it needed it fast. Cheap air conditioning allowed builders more flexibility to mass-produce the suburbs that sprawled out as a solution to America's post-war housing crisis, even in hot climates like the Sun Belt. Air conditioning made large swaths of the country newly habitable, fueling the spectacular growth of many now flourishing metropolises across the American South and Southwest.
In less than a century, the AC transformed blisteringly hot Phoenix from a small desert town, population 65,000, into the fifth largest city in the country. At the same time, as the AC became ubiquitous in America, many architects stopped designing buildings for their specific context, said Sonia Chow, Associate Dean of Architecture at the University of Miami and author of Calibrating Coastal Resilience. What we have today are buildings in South Florida that look a lot like the buildings being built in California or Arizona, or more temperate climates, when in fact we really shouldn't be building in the same ways. Most homes in South Florida once sat atop crawl spaces that protected them against floodwaters and let in a breeze to naturally cool the rooms above, said Chow. But many local buildings are now built directly atop concrete, meaning that as the earth itself gets warmer, the homes above absorb the heat too. Of course, if you blast your AC high enough, you probably won't feel it. And for decades, that gave American developers tacit permission to pare down the elements like thick masonry, high ceilings, shaded porches, and window shutters that once naturally kept us cool in favor of cheap drywall and easier-to-construct boxy floor plans that helped them cram sprawling tracts of ready-made starter homes across suddenly bustling desert cities, such as Phoenix and Albuquerque. They cleared trees and poured asphalt, churning out decades' worth of leaky, heat-absorbent neighborhoods. But it didn't matter, so long as the AC kept running.
The problem with America's hyper-reliance on the AC proved transformational to American life in profoundly positive ways, stretching the boundaries of where one can comfortably live and greatly reducing extreme heat as a public health threat. The problem is, if for whatever reason the AC is not running, many American homes now become immediately and extraordinarily exposed. We all like to believe that the grid is safe and stable, said Katrin Klingenberg, executive director of FIAS, which sets standards for passive homes constructed in the U.S. But it's actually way more vulnerable than we all think. Researchers estimate that if Phoenix were to experience a 2-day blackout during one of its regular heat waves, knocking out air conditioning citywide, it would quickly kill 12,800 people, or roughly 1% of the population, while a full half of the city would require emergency medical care. Arizonans will always need AC to stay safe from the heat, but they could be far more resilient to temporary lapses if their homes and neighborhoods were better designed to stay cool without it. If Phoenix planted enough trees to shade half of its streets, which would be enough to lower the city's temperature by at least a few degrees, 27% fewer residents would die in such a blackout, according to the study. If every building installed a cool roof, simply painting it with a white material to better reflect sunlight, then the death toll would plummet by 66%. This is not just a thought experiment. Driven by extreme weather and an aging electrical grid, the number of power outages in the U.S. has doubled over the past 2 decades.
After Hurricane Beryl knocked out power for millions in Texas in 2024, at least dozens and possibly hundreds of people died from heat-related causes, meaning the outage may have been deadlier than the storm itself. It overcomes you really fast, said Patricia Solis, executive director of the Knowledge Exchange for Resilience at Arizona State University, which focuses on Maricopa County, where hundreds of people die from heat-related causes each year, many inside their own homes, their air conditioning broken, turned off, or unplugged. One of them was Stephanie Pullman, a 72-year-old who died in Phoenix in 2018, a day after her electricity was cut off over a $51 unpaid bill. Another was Patricia Miletich, a 70-year-old with memory issues, whose busted AC was blowing hot 110-plus degree air into her RV when she died in June 2024. Upwards of a quarter of Arizonans who succumb to heat inside their homes live in mobile houses, structures whose thin walls, poor insulation, and cramped concrete quarters make them especially expensive to cool with AC,
and especially deadly without it. Because this extreme heat is going to happen increasingly to more and more of us around the world, Solis warned, we have to make it a part of the way that we build our environments, that we build our homes, that we rebuild our homes. How to build a home for the climate we actually have. It's not as hard or expensive as you might think to build a cooler home, one that does at least some of the work needed to keep things more comfortable in extreme temperatures.
It's not about doing extraordinary things. It's about doing ordinary things extraordinarily well, he said, like making sure your walls are airtight and thick enough to act as a buffer against outside temperatures. If most American buildings absorb heat like a plastic water bottle left out in the sun, a passive house is built like a thermos, keeping things relatively temperate regardless of the temperature outside. To illustrate that, a group of architects once built two miniature houses, one according to normal building codes, and the other like a passive house, plopped them in a park in New York City, and filled both with 1,800 pounds of ice. 1 month later, the mini passive house had 40% of its ice left, while the other one had only 7%. You can imagine how much safer that makes you if your AC ever goes out, and makes it up to 90% less energy intensive to run, enough to cut your utility bills in half when it's on. If we're much more intentional about insulating the property, the heating and cooling systems have to do a lot less work, said A.J. Patton, founder of the Chicago-based developer 548 Enterprises, which is currently building Chicago's largest ever passive house certified affordable housing complex now. Too often, we've used sustainable technologies as a luxury item, said Patton. But the biggest benefits to these homes are for lower-income households who could really use the savings on their bills, or are more vulnerable to having their power cut off. As of now, only about 1% of homes being built in the U.S. are built according to passive standards. One might assume that building such a sensible, sustainable, and safer home must be prohibitively expensive, or else it would be much more common. After all, who doesn't want a significantly lower utility bill, all other things being equal? But in reality, at least in Massachusetts, where passive designs are now the mandatory norm in many cities, a survey found that such buildings only cost as little as 2 to 3% more than conventional buildings. Equally important, in a country with a notorious housing shortage, the municipalities in Massachusetts that have opted into more stringent requirements continue to build new homes at a faster clip than those that haven't, and they approved more new housing permits after the change. There could be a lot of factors at play in those differences, but at the very least, it shows that requiring strict standards in this case might not, as some skeptics fear, crash our housing production, Gardmurray said. The real reason why these building techniques don't happen more often comes down to a lack of awareness, experts told me, along with the fact that the biggest financial benefits are for whoever pays the utility bill, not the developer who has to pay the upfront costs. It doesn't help either that the Trump administration has cut or let expire tax credits that helped defray the extra costs of energy-efficient buildings. Some projects like Patton's lost out on $300,000 in expected incentives in real time. The moronic government policies of the last 18 months are not helping us, said Mark Ginsberg, a founding partner of Curtis plus Ginsberg Architects, which has completed about 25 multifamily passive projects in New York City, most of them affordable or supportive housing. There are too many people burying their heads in the sand and saying climate change isn't real, he said. That's easier when the AC hides the worst effects of extreme heat from us. But on the verge of a heat wave poised to put 175 million Americans at risk, it may be past time to give our AC a little boost too.
What lingers is the quiet sturdiness of a poem that doubles as a survival guide, or a wall designed to catch a breeze. Older forms solved immediate problems while carrying a specific weight of history. Reliance on a cooling unit or an automated script offers a shortcut that feels like freedom until the grid fails or the meaning thins out. It's a shift from systems that endure to those that merely function. If the knowledge of how to live without a switch is lost, what remains to keep life steady when the power stops?